Further ado, we'll begin with Leonard Harris. And you'll have to use the mic, Leonard.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me okay?
No.
No. Okay.
You want to try my mic? Good. Sounds like you're on.
Hello? Hello?
And you have the backup mic here.
All right. When I did in preparation for the roundtable discussion, I made myself some notes and some definitions, which help me describe various conditions of possible future. And so my discussion is in some sense not an answer to what the future should be, but a set of problems about thinking about what the future should be. And so I don't know if you can see these definitions on the chart. So maybe some just in case. These definitions are heuristics, just things to help me work out some ideas about what the future might look like. Since I have no way of knowing what the future might look like. This continues to help me think about the future. I first started thinking about the future many years ago when I was talking around and I had met the last generation of African philosophers, Harold Hooker, Paul Grant, and in that meeting, I learned about a book called Ethiopia Unbound by J.D. Henry. Ethiopia Unbound is a picture of a possible future. It's an idealized version of the African village where everyone is in the community and something very happy. It was a deep contrast to the Paris community, where also everyone was very happy because they lived in a relatively urban setting. That was a contrast to the liberation camp, who had a conception of the future that included a religious sensibility in a socialist world, semi-socialist world. These are all different futures, different ways of imagining what the future will look like. Sometimes, when we think about the future, we think about liberation as inclusion, that is, everyone will be in power, or everyone will have an equal income, or in Marxist terms, they will have ownership of themselves, or in Marxist terms, they will have capacity. But there's a deep divide between thinking about the future. Some people think about the future in terms of a world that's going to be enchanted. They think about it in spiritual terms. Those persons usually believe in a moral universe. And sometimes they don't think about it in spiritual terms, and they still believe in a moral universe. A moral universe is one in which conflicts are resolved, one in which misery is abated, where there's redemption, where there's vindication, where there's reparation. A moral universe is one in which our lives are meaningful. A non-moral universe is one in which our lives are not meaningful. There may not be a resolution of contradiction. All of us tend to be on one side of the other. Imagine a moral universe and imagine a non-moral universe. Then there's another sort of divide. This is divide whether or not they think that the future will involve the resolution of contradiction. In this sense, there's a divide between people who are present and they're concerned with living individuals. How can we end the misery of those who live now? And futurists, Afro-futurists, are thinking about what would life be like 3 generations hence. Not in our lifetime, not in our children's lifetime, not in our children's children's lifetime, but in a lifetime that we will never see. What would that future look like? And they imagine that future in terms of maintaining the cultural characteristics of the current African world into a cyberspace, into a technology concerning future generations. Now, in some sense, you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's much like the generation of the elders who want to both build a church and also build a labor. Sometimes you don't have money for both. It's a tension, at the very least, a tension involved. And so, when I have that as an beginning to think about how to resolve these kinds of tensions. What kind of world do you want in future generations? Which generations hence?
Okay. For me, in terms of the future, I think as we talk about shifting geographies, we're also thinking about telling new stories. We need them now, and up to us to be creative. As a Black woman, I think it's important to understand that political mobilization is the key to protection, internal and external, organization of the mind, body, and spirit towards others. There is no real grounding for the abuse of others. In the category of human treatment, the bottom always falls out. As we wait for the ground to collapse under our feet, we are bombarded with images of the floor cracking. Black Lives Matter is universal. It applies to all categories of Black existence. Our sexuality, race, identity, self-construction, and presence matter collectively. We are here. I think we need to send a message to the world that we are here. And for me, in terms of the future, also theoretically, I'm thinking that it's really important that we start using thinkers of the global south. I think Louis was talking about this yesterday and has been talking about this. I wrote a short story a couple of years ago when I went to China for the first time to teach. What I felt to do was to take thinkers that really do matter to me. I took other thinkers because I thought that was what was expected of me, to realize that I made a mistake. And then from that moment on, I think my message to future generations is that it's absolutely important that we start thinking about our own thinkers. They're all over. We should read them. We should understand how to send a strong message that we matter, we count, we are here. And that we need new poetry, new ways of articulating who we are within this modernity. It's really up to us to be creative, and we have to do it now. I think also another message, if I'm thinking about the future, is that we need to turn towards the African continent where, again, we have serious catastrophes going on, like the killing of LGBTIQ people. I think this is something we seriously have to think about, how to maybe send strong messages to help those governments are still not understanding that these are also humans, that we can't control their sexuality, and that they are humans, and these mixed messages that we send into the West that, by killing homosexuals is okay. It's not okay at all. So we have to think about how to talk about this for the future of that continent. So, I don't know, this is, I think, when I'm talking about new poetry, I'm talking about creativity, really. I think that it's also through our creative minds that we will help future generations to explore, to invent this world.
Okay. I think I will stand. Get too fast.
Okay, I'm going to stand because I'll get through what I have to say faster, since the time is short. The colonial experience in the Caribbean succeeded in casting a long and dark shadow over our intellectual and cultural production. Since the end of formal colonization, the disciplines of Caribbean knowledge production have been recovering and gaining academic recognition at different rates. Thus, Caribbean history, literature, economics were the first to recover and to receive academic recognition, both regionally and internationally. In this process of disciplinary recovery, Caribbean philosophy has been one of the last to recover and to gain academic recognition. It has gained this recognition thanks to pushes within the region and also to our close associations with African philosophy, African American, and Latin American philosophy. And we were able to form these alliances because these philosophies were going through similar periods of late recovery from colonial experiences. Also very important to the growth of Caribbean philosophy it was, of course, the formation of the CPA in Jamaica 14 years ago. This growth should be clear to all who have been attending this conference. The papers that have been presented here over the past 12 years, the books that have been written, and the embracing of the theme of shifting the geography of reason. So, for example, in the field of political philosophy, we've got important concepts that have gained international recognition, such as Charles Mills's concept of the racial contract. We have Neil Robinson's concept of freedomless marriage, which is really taking off. Everywhere I go, I hear about it, I like it. And of course, we have a new term, very interesting new term, in an older discourse of pluralization that has been made by Jane Gordon, our fantastic president. I say let's give her a hand. Yeah. Yeah, so this new discourse, this new term in the discourse of pluralization by Jane, Michael Monahan, and again, Neil Robbins. I think these are some very important developments in this field. In the field of transcendental phenomenology, we've given the world some interesting new concepts. Concepts such as the Du Boisian hesitation, the Jamesian full stop, Sylvia Wynter's founding and liminal categories, her concept of ceremonies, pluricentered models of dialectical thinking that go beyond both the Hegelian and Marxian conceptions of the dialectic, and our own Lewis Gordon's concept of disciplinary decadence. If we add all of these together, this is a very outstanding set of contributions to how you do transcendental phenomena. The cumulative impact of this, right, we should not miss. This is an accumulation of thinking that is significant and has certainly moved the ball forward. It has certainly contributed to the shifting of the geography. In the field of existential phenomenology, right, we've seen the further systematic development of important concepts, such as those of double consciousness, white masks. Indeed, when you look at the program for this particular meeting of the CPA, it's almost a Fanon meeting. The number of papers on Fanon cannot fail to strike you. Concepts such as bad faith and anti-black racism, ressentiment and Eurocentrism, and black nihilism. I think these are important contributions to the field of existential phenomenology that have come out of the work of the association and really indicate the kind of intellectual and theoretical growth that has been taking place in the association. Now, I could go on to describe more about this growth, to talk about conceptual and discursive development in areas such as ontology and ethics, but the time has come for me to shift gears. In spite of this very, very real and important growth that has taken place over the past 12 years, since the Great Recession of 2008, it has become urgent for Caribbean philosophy to begin to thematize its own political-economic foundations. That the political economy upon which the practice of Caribbean philosophy now rests is virtually in shambles. And the discipline now needs to turn its attention to these foundations. The urgency of this need, for me, was brought home very clearly last night in Professor Mbogo's comments about South Africa and Fanon's two texts, Black Skin, White Mass, and The Wretched of the Earth. Mbogo stressed the growing importance of the wretched in response to the economic crises of post-apartheid and post-recession South Africa. I want to suggest that the same applies to the Caribbean. Indeed, both regions can be usefully viewed as currently being suspended between Fanon's Wretched of the Earth and the Sheila Base on the post-colony. This space between the wretched and the post-colony has largely been defined by the collapse of progressive and popular movements for political and economic change. These are movements for change that attempted to restructure both the Caribbean state and the Caribbean economy and the relationships between the two. On the African continent, the kinds of movements that I have in mind were movements such as those led by Nkrumah of Ghana, Julius Nyerere in Tanzania, Frelimo in Mozambique, Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Bissau. In the Caribbean, the kinds of progressive movements that I have in mind are the Democratic Socialist, the Black Democratic Socialist movement, led by the early P.C. Byrd, Michael Manley in Jamaica, the early Fox Burnham in Guyana, and of course the Maurice Bishop Revolution in Grenada. The strength of these movements is that they were expressions of the economic creativity, the economic subjectivity of the masses of Caribbean people. That when we talk about spontaneous economic creativity coming out of the region, it has consistently taken a cooperative form. Workers in the region spontaneously organize themselves cooperatively. Now, so we've got long histories of agricultural cooperatives, banking cooperatives, retail cooperatives, producer cooperatives. Now, this cooperative creativity that erupts from the masses was the basis for what came to be known as the three-sector economy. This concept of a three-sector economy was basic to those movements, those progressive movements that I just mentioned. And they all build upon this cooperative base that continues to erupt from the message. So in this three-sector economy, you always found a state sector, a cooperative sector, and a private sector. And this was, I thought, best exemplified by the revolution in Romania. Indeed, the most creative and innovative contributions to the field of economics coming out of the Caribbean has been around this concept of this three-sector economy. If you want to find what's original in Caribbean economic thinking, this is where you have to go. So just to give you some sense of the underlying principles of this three-sector economy, we have things like markets existed before capitalism. Right? Therefore, we should not equate capitalism with markets. This was something you heard routinely during this period. Who is the economy for? This was probably the most philosophical question that erupted. You go into cooperatives, and people would repeatedly ask this question. But who are the economy for? Who is the economy for? Interesting question. Is it for bankers? Is it for industrialists? Is it for farmers? Is it for the proletariat? These were the questions that people asked. Right? Is the economy for financiers? And the answer that always came back, the economy is for the people. The economy is for the people. I can hear it running through my ears right now. And so the question became how to institutionalize this idea that the economy is for the people. Right? And it is this attempt to keep the economy as belonging to the people, working for the people, that has been the basis for cooperative socialism in the Caribbean. Right? So I think at this point, I need to make this very important statement that until very recently, the Caribbean has never produced an outstanding, original, liberal thinker. I think it is about to do so now. And we have the honor of having that person right here among us. And I think Brother Charles knows exactly what I'm talking about him. Charles is about to be the first innovative thinker in the liberal tradition that the Caribbean has produced. All of our liberal thinkers have been purely imitated. Charles will go down in intellectual history for making serious innovations in the liberal tradition and as a person from the Caribbean. Right? Think about all of our other great economic thinkers. C.L.R. James, Césaire. They're all either revolutionary socialists, democratic, black democratic socialists, cooperative socialists, or Fabian socialists. So Arthur Lewis was a Fabian socialist. Right? So this is the economic tradition of the Caribbean. Right? And it is grounded in the fact that people spontaneously organize economic activity cooperatively. I suspect that this has deep African roots, and so maybe my African brothers can, clear this up for me. Now, unfortunately, what we are confronted with today is the outcomes, the very, very disastrous outcomes of these progressive socialist experiments. That whether we talk about Grenada, whether we talk about Michael Mann in Jamaica, whether we talk about Casey Burton and Teeter, right? the story is the same, that these experiments did not work. Right? And I think it's very important to note that the crisis of Caribbean socialism preceded the crisis in the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, even China. That the projects began to collapse even earlier than they did abroad. This is something we have not examined the significance of. I think it's also important when we look at the ways in which Caribbean capitalism, right, has prefigured many of the crises of major capitalist countries and economies. So when I think of the financial collapse in Jamaica that led to the formation of FinSAC, and you look at the major financial collapse and all of these government programs to rescue them, we went through this in Jamaica. Right? So Caribbean economies are very much a part of the modern period. They are inserted into both the capitalist and the socialist variants of this modernity. And unfortunately for us, neither one has really worked, is it? And the moment that we're in right now, why I said that we are suspended between Fanon, the wretched of the earth, and Ashima Mbembe's the post-colony, is precisely because neither of these two projects have worked for us. With the collapse of these socialist experiments, we were invaded, of course, by neoliberal projects, which were externally imposed because we were indebted, and using the pretext of indebtedness, we were bombarded by all of these neoliberal programs. New sets of economic arguments came into the region, replaced much of the indigenous thinking, and this was true even at the Department of Economics at the University of West Indies. Irony of ironies, there was a time, even at the Sir Arthur Lewis Research Center, where teaching Sir Arthur Lewis became a problem. Now, since the crisis of 2008, right, the faith in neoliberal projects have just about virtually collapsed. They have collapsed precisely because of the level of inequality that they are producing in the Caribbean. They are collapsing because, in a lot of smaller islands, we are now developing ghettos at the same time that we're producing millionaires. I can tell you, when I was growing up on the island of Antigua, we had neither millionaires nor ghettos. Now we got both. Right? And so this dramatic increase in the level of inequality, which matches the level of inequality that you're seeing in the United States, in places like Mexico, and so forth. This unprecedented production of social inequality, right, is beginning to hit the Caribbean imagination as being fundamentally wrong. And so we're talking about it is time to revive this indigenous tradition of cooperative socialism. I'm speaking to you about it because every time I hear another statistic, that is exactly where I go. I go and grab for my cooperative socialism. This doesn't sound right to me. Makes me angry. And when I get angry about social inequality, I begin to talk socialism. So I want to suggest here that the time has come for Caribbean philosophy to begin to engage this abandoned tradition of cooperative socialism, because it is still the most natural basis upon which economic thinking and economic practice operates in the region. We have a responsibility to articulate this voice, this creativity, you say, particularly at a time like this. That in doing so, we need to do a number of things if we are not to repeat the mistakes of the past. First, we need to grasp why these experiments failed. Where were they lacking? What did we do wrong? Second, we need to be much, much clearer on why other socialist experiments in the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, etc., also collapsed. What were the problems there? You know? Here we need to take a page out of the capitalist book. When they have crises, they really study it. You know? They come up with answers. See, that's what John Maynard Keynes did. Right now, socialism needs nothing like it needs its John Maynard Keynes. So if anybody out there interested in being the John Maynard Keynes of socialism, I'm ready to hear you. Now, one of the most controversial things we see in The Wretched of the Earth is Fanon's assessment of the capabilities, the economic capabilities of the various classes of Caribbean society. What can the bourgeoisie do? What can the national bourgeoisie do? What can the peasants do? What can the working class do? I think if we are going to move forward, we need to revisit these questions. Has anything changed in the economic capabilities of the Caribbean bourgeoisie? Has anything changed in the economic capabilities of the Caribbean proletariat? Is Fanon right in putting the emphasis that he did in 1960 on the peasantry? Has the economic capabilities of peasantry changed in the intervening decades? I think these are the kinds of questions that we need to address very, very carefully, and then to build a project that's appropriate to the capabilities of these various classes. In this, of course, we have to talk about the capabilities of Caribbean states. That they're going to be a part of this because there will be a state sector. How will the Caribbean state perform? Now, one of the things about this three-sector model that's very interesting about it is that there was always this deep sense that the Caribbean state was limited in its capability, that it could never manage the entire economy itself. So there's never been a socialist project in the Caribbean that completely eliminated the market and attempted to have the state run the economy in its entirety. I think, again, here's a lesson coming up from the people themselves that Caribbean socialists need to learn. Okay. Running out of time, so basically, these are the kind of issues we need to think about. We also need to think about the impact of all of this new communications technology that we've been, encountering every day, some new invention. And the question here we need to ask is this technology creating fewer jobs than it is in fact eliminating? Because unemployment would be a very, very, very big problem for any future economy. So these are just some thoughts about how we can begin to move forward to get us out of this state of suspension between Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth and a Sheila that is on the postcard.
Good. Unfortunately, we have to leave the room soon, and but the good thing, it means that we've been talking so often that we can create that wonderful accompaniment to our conversation called OH, or alcohol. Some, however, who don't indulge in such substances, and I, being a Yardman, know that we can also find more creative means. However, I'm going to just make some remarks, and I take it that our president would like to make some closing remarks since we'd have to leave the room. So I'll be very... I cannot hear you. Oh, it's been changed. Oh, good. So there'll be... I didn't know. See, I thought we only had 10 minutes. So I'll quickly say what I was going to say, and perhaps some of you would like to say something, okay? The brief thing I would like to say are just 3 points, and one of the things was, before I bring it to you all, I'm going to ask Frieda Ekotto if she was reflecting a little more, because she had made hers, because of the time constraint, maybe shorter than she wished. Yeah. So the 3 things I would just like to say very briefly are this. The first one is, and it's hinted at in Paget's presentation, when we're talking about possible futures, we often, when we talk about such phenomena, fail to bring that we're talking about human futures. Now, it's not that they're not futures for other things, they're not in terms of physics or zoology and all those terms, but one of the things that's often missing, and especially in a concept such as a crisis, is that crises are all about human beings' relationship to decisions. In fact, the very notion, the concept of crisis, is ultimately from, in its etymological roots, krenein, which means to choose or to decide. And the problem we human beings have is sometimes we have to make a decision, but we don't want to. And so what we do is we hold up the circumstances, make things worse, and we fail eventually to understand our role in the situations we have built. Now, I bring this up because one of the concepts circulating here, but we hear quite often, is the concept of failure. And what's striking about failure, and I've written a lot on failure, is that quite often when you hear about failure, you hear about it from people who said, what you're trying to do will fail. Why? Because we tried and we failed. The error with that logic, and I've seen it quite often. Paget has known me for years. There are a lot of things that you've seen what we have tried to do where people did tell us not to do it, not even to attempt it, because they have tried and they failed. But then we said, well, let us try anyway. And we find ourselves in a very different situation. This very organization, for instance, someone told us could never get off the ground because they have tried other things and they failed. The fallacy of that position is that it presupposes that the conditions of possibility are constant. What people fail to realize about their failure is that their so-called failure is a shifting of the material conditions for subsequent generation. So, for instance, if we think about many of our ancestors, our indigenous ancestors who met sword and cross, if we think about our African ancestors who were shackled and brought over, if we think about our ancestors on all levels, ancestors, for instance, who were women who faced very different ways of living as women, men who faced different ways of living as men, for them, they could not even imagine the kind of world we live in today. And many of them, in their efforts, their revolts, which were marked as failures, what people failed to understand, led to efforts to realign that create conditions for the very future we have. Paradoxically, our actions are actually the outcomes of theirs, which means that their so-called failures were actually the conditions for our possibility. It means then that we have to perhaps think beyond the logic of failure and success. And this becomes very crucial because, you see, as some of you know, There are groups, for instance, who talk in the logic of pessimism and optimism. But one of the funny things about particularly existentialists is many existentialists don't work within that logic. The reason is because the logic presupposes having a priori or prior knowledge to outcomes, when it is in fact our actions that have to build the conditions for those outcomes. Put differently, if you're an enslaved woman in 1800, what you do not in any stretch of your imagination expect to see the outcomes of your actions. Many of us are great-great-great-great-grandchildren of such people, but what they knew is that their actions needed to be done. And so this is connected to, I think, a fundamental problem we have today. There is something strange about how theorists theorize today. Theorists theorize today as if the theorist is to experience the outcome of the theory. And if you think about how theorists used to theorize, 18th century or the 19th century, theorists in the past were trying to think about setting conditions for a world they could never, ever imagine to inhabit. Do you see what I'm saying? The project of the 19th century was about thinking the 20th. The project of the 20th about the 21st. What's strange in the 21st is they're not people thinking beyond 5 or 10 years down the road. If you think about it, the logic is trapped in whether to return to an 18th century, a 19th century, or a 20th century, when the task at hand may be not that you know what the 22nd century is, but to understand what it is to think in the 21st century in a way that will be the conditions for the 22nd century, although you may not live and experience those outcomes. Now, what creates the pessimism is a logic that eradicates something that's very crucial and we see outside of the framework of possibilities we've hitherto worked with. And that is the understanding that ultimately what it means to think in a way, and as odd as this may sound, that's not about you. See, too many people, when they think, it really collapses from we, or even they, whom we will never meet. It becomes, what do I get? Me, me, me. And that kind of presentism collapses into a world in which, for instance, one could destroy the planet because one won't live in the destroyed planet. One can begin not to think about it, people think about how do I get my peace in terms of logics of, bless you, race, sexuality, and these categories, as if that's the end of the story. We have no idea what other kinds of identities and proliferation of humanity may succeed us. There may even be hybrids with species we don't even understand. But that isn't really the point. The point is how we can sit and begin to think through what it means to think from a radical conception of difference that has a conception through which one can have an ethical relationship to that which is not even might be, but must be alien to whom and what we are. So I would suggest then that a different form of praxis is needed, and it's one in which we begin to deal with a praxis that deal with creative possibility with the understanding that we really do not control all the conditions of the outcome, but paradoxically, we are the conditions of that outcome. So I'll leave it from there, and I would like Frieda Ekotto, because I thought she spoke too soon, too short, because of the misguided conception of time we had. And I think she had more to say, and we have a little extra time, as President Jane Gordon said, which means if some of you would like to be the last word, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Before I say anything, I just want to thank Jane Gordon, I don't know your last name, for organizing this meeting. Thank you very much. It's really good to be here, I think, and to enjoy the work of ideas and to share them with others. So, for me, when I was thinking about the future, I was talking about we need to be creative, you know. I think this whole idea of creativity comes from, I take it from Leopold Selassie Senghor, who talked about how art will be what will be saving Africa. And I think when I'm talking about the art, I'm also talking about how they need to be creative, and I think that's what I've heard from my 3 colleagues here. And through creativity, I'm also thinking about how we have to constantly thinking about new ways of having our voices out there. And we are the only people who can do this. No one else can do that for us. We have to be at the front and do it. By all means necessary, I think we have to, you know, be creative. I'm also thinking about how we heard last night about South Africa and how students are being creative reading finance texts. What I noticed about the continent in Africa there is that thanks to creativity, you know, human beings are surviving. And they have survived, and they will continue to survive. So I think, you know, for me, when I'm thinking about the future, I'm thinking about new ways of pushing the boundaries of that creativity. I was in Africa in April, and I went to talk to students at the university. I could not believe how the conditions of students in some countries. I was in Cameroon, that's my country. They don't have books, but for some reason, because of internet today, you know, we talk about technology, they can read. So it's up to us also to find ways to give them more to read through giving them our text, putting them on the net so that they can be more creative. And I'm hopeful because I think, you know, sometimes when I go to Africa, I come back, I'm kind of depressed, but sometimes I'm also full of energy because I think if they can survive out there, we can all survive, and we can continue to survive. So the future is there. We need to rethink through the concepts. I think we know that as thinkers, as theorists, we are doing that. We also have to find ways to give rooms for others to push their creativities through us because we have the means to help them out. So basically, that's what I wanted to say.
So if you could place that so the CPA's begun as a ways of nurture creative intellectuals seeing themselves with one another, and not justifying what they were doing, but actually doing it. And so we're delighted to see that that's continued this year. But the only way for that to continue is through great collective effort. So Rosario and I, of course, have several thank yous to say. So Rosario is going to begin by talking about why we met here and all of the various people and institutions with which we work to pull this off.
Hi, almost there. You know, the CPA is many things, many things. But there's one thing that it is not: lazy. It is not a lazy organization. It's a very serious organization. One that cares very deeply and very seriously about the work that we do, how we do this work, and about how many people we would like to do this work, right? And so it's about getting out there to many different places to basically really shape the direction of wisdom. And to do that, not only do we need to get to the Caribbean diaspora, we also need to look at many of the diasporas, but also not only the ones that have spread, but the ones that have not necessarily spread, such as native lands, right? The real homelands, and the Mayan land in connection to the Caribbean force that it has, and in connection to the politics of Mexico and Latin America as we have been seeing lately. It was very important for us to try to get here. Mexico opened its doors immediately to do that. They first gave us, we've been working on this for 3 years now, even when Mike Monahan and Nelson were still president and VP, we looked into different places and we thought of Chiapas immediately, even though it wasn't necessarily like created in terms of land, but in terms of concept, it definitely is, right? So we thought of going there, and we opened the doors. The Universidad de la Tierra said, yes, come here. But the infrastructure of getting everyone there is really hard. Because you can only go to one airport and then travel for like more than a few hours to Cristobal. And then from there, we have to walk to Universidad de la Tierra. And so to do that, we everyone to set up plan retreats and everything there would be really hard. And the risks of what Mexico is suffering right now would have been even harder. So that was a big challenge. We looked into different universities, and here in Quintana Roo, it's one place where the infrastructure for tourism is so immensely high. We understand that, the exploitation of that gradient is also high. But this is why also it's a very good reason to be here and reflect on that and make a point out of that. Yesterday night, we were here with Mayan students, and they said never, ever have they been able to be in a place like this, talking about their Mayan culture, speaking their Mayan language, taking that power right here. We've never felt that recognition. In fact, the technicians also started to speak Mayan, and before they didn't tell us that they were actually Mayan. So their pride sort of came back out of seeing it. So this is one of the things the CPA does. It brings these color to these inviting of these places, right? So that was one of the things. So it took a long time. This process was very heavy to do here, but then this hotel, the Iberostar, even though it sounds completely imperialistic, opened these doors to charge us Mexicans for Mexican price and give us all of this for free. All of these rooms, all of the equipment, everything that we have right now is free. The coffee breaks they did not ask us to pay any of that stuff. The Iberostar also, the owners are from Spain, and although of course they are probably wealthy, some of that money also goes to the Basque country. And the Basque, some of that funding goes to pay for Zapatistas. The Zapatistas do not accept any money from the government of Mexico, and it's the Basque country that actually, through a Sociedad Anónima, that gives money to fund the hospitals and the cooperatives in the Zapatista country. So this was a lot of research that we had to do. We also looked at the politics of Quintana Roo. Quintana Roo has very different politics from the rest of Mexico. Mexico is a very complex country. What you think you know, you might know. And Quintana Roo's politics is very different from the rest of the country. People in Quintana Roo do not pay taxes for housing, do not pay taxes for their cars. Whereas in the rest of Mexico they do. Also, the border with Belize represents something very different as the border from Chiapas and Guatemala. And one of them is that we don't have the same sort of problems as we do with the border between Guatemala all the way to the United States. So it's very complex. We did our research for that. It took us a long time. And I know that sometimes we feel trapped in this immense paradise of the island. But you need to know that the students, we've done CPAs in other places where we go to universities and we have it there. Trust me, we have seen more students here from the local universities than when we go to these other places sometimes, and we're in the university and we see fewer students from the university. That's a very important point. Maybe they didn't meet these students, but they felt so supported. And they now told us that they want to create this bridge with the CPA, the Universidad of Quintana Roo and Chetumal, to try building a philosophy department, because they didn't have a philosophy department. And they already offered to have workshops where they want us to teach and Luis, and I don't know if you're going to learn Spanish or Mayan. But I think that's very powerful, and you need to know these things. This is why we chose this place. It's the Caribbean, it is the Mayan land, it is my land, and I'm very proud. Thank you so much for coming.
Just a quick litany of thank yous as well. There are partners in the UCONN, there are partners in Da Vinci, there are tech assistants who've helped us throughout, who've enabled all of this conversation to take place. There are translators, there's Vito, there's Peter Bloom, who had to leave early. They made all of this possible. They enabled us to talk. But I also wanted, is April still here? April, can you stand up for just 1 second? Academics love to talk about activists and to romanticize activism. April is not only just extraordinary in her own right, she brought into our midst a group of people who are not only incredibly politically astute, they're really revolutionary what they're doing. And they shared stories which actually endangered them in a very significant way. And so we owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude, and I'd like to single April out. Then in addition, I have to thank Mike Monahan, our treasurer, the entire executive board of the CPA and our secretariat, but absolutely Rosario, who's our troubleshooter extraordinaire. Garrett to come up to the front, Garrett Cooper, and Zach, and Frieda's right here because our poets are going to close out the meeting. So Garrett, if you could lead us on.